The previous trips with Rob in 1984 and 1985 had given me a perspective and important information about visiting Thailand during that period of time, and it's important to remember that things were very different then. When Rob and I visited, we were very careful to visit during a slower part of the season, so we went in August each year and made certain never to visit when US Navy sailors had ships moored out in Pattaya Bay and on Liberty in Pattaya. We had seen all the sailor hats and memorabilia in Pattaya bars in 1984 and 1985, and when we told ladies we were Americans, they would ask, "Where's your ship?" And they would peer out into the bay. It was like they dreamed of those ships' visits and waited anxiously for the US Navy. Back then, Pattaya was a common port of call. However, the discovery of AIDS and the concerns that it caused cut way back on the US Navy visits to Thailand in the 1990s. So this trip is from the perspective of a US sailor visiting Pattaya during the hot May timeframe. Pattaya was populated with around 800 or more sailors every night. Because of my experience and tourist guides' pamphlets to show crew members, the enlisted sailors I met were very excited about the trip. They had been to Phuket the previous year and were disappointed. They had expected a party atmosphere, but Phuket back in 1988 was still pretty quiet and the Patong area was not overdeveloped. The officers on the ship loved Phuket then. It was quiet, peaceful and a quality place to visit the beach and maybe have your wife meet you there. Some enlisted men took their money and got rides in the town of Phuket and reported there was nothing there to do either. I had assured the men that Pattaya would be different and they were not disappointed this time. The ship moored out in Pattaya Bay pretty far out to sea at about 9 a.m. Sailors began to assemble to depart the ship in civilian clothes. The Thais had a group of Liberty boats hired to transport sailors about 30 minutes into Pattaya from the sea. The Liberty boats were quite slow and travelled in pairs. I always managed to be in the slowest boat. The sailors were anxious as they could see Pattaya slowly getting closer and the boat bobbing slowly as we got closer to the shore. The boat drivers informed us that they could only take us to a certain area and we would have to wade ashore. They told us to roll up our pants, take off shoes, use the laces and tie shoes around our necks and hold our bags and backpacks up high. We did not need to worry about the water in the bay being cold. The outside temperature in May around noon was easily 95 Fahrenheit with humidity. We got to a certain point and the boat captain signalled us to disembark. Sailors leapt over the sides into the water. The water was not deep and luckily the bottom was soft and we began wading in the heat. There were some bar girls in the water to greet us and some even helped sailors carry their shoes and packs. We never expected that. Once on the beach, it was a mad scramble as these lunatic sailors wanted to race to the bars. I knew where I was and I got my shoes on and went to the hotel from 1985, the PK Villa, and checked in. Back then, nobody except a few officers had reservations. They stayed at the Montien or Royal Garden for $20, more than PK. I had always dreaded to see what a nice place like Pattaya would be like with 800 screaming idiot American sailors in the streets. A US carrier group can have 4,000 to 5,000 of them. Back in 1989, all the sailors were male. That changed a few years later and Pattaya rarely was visited by the fleet after 1993 or so. But looking at the town, there was no reason to dread. Businesses were booming. There were many more bar girls in town than we had ever seen. 1984/85, it was like they had been bussed in from all over Thailand for the 5 to 6 day stay. It was really an electric atmosphere. By 1989, there were of course more go-go bars, especially in Soi Diamond, but not too many more, maybe 12 to 15. Nothing like now. Vendors were everywhere and the party was on. The US Navy posted many shore patrol police to help maintain order and crack down on sailor violations. The rule was that no sailor was allowed in a pharmacy store. I found out later why. A few sailors I knew found me on Beach Road in the first few hours in Pattaya and they asked if they could hang out with me because I knew the ropes. I said, sure, and took them to Soi Diamond and the Carousel Bar. We were burning up out there in the midday heat. I thought I would play a joke on these guys. From our trip in 1985, Rob and I had learned where the Ladyboy hangout was. I did not mention this in previous stories because we simply were not interested in ladyboys at all. In fact, I had started a commotion in a bar in 1985 when I was apparently looking too closely at a ladyboy. One of the females took offence and went to the trouble of telling me that is a ladyboy. I was never sure what was going on about a ladyboy or a lady, got very offended and was starting big trouble with a chit-chat in the bar and us, so we fled. But we did see where the ladyboys gathered in 1985, and I remembered. There was a bar in the back of Soi Diamond, and from the Carousel Bar I could see it. So as a joke, I told the sailors I knew a place where the women were especially hot and to follow me. Now, my memory of that bar from 1985 was that there were ladyboys and real ladies working there, and sure enough, when we walked in, we were quickly surrounded and my alarm bells sounded in my head. The ladies were extremely aggressive, and one of them took off everything she was wearing immediately and showed us an outstanding figure and her female parts. I knew something was wrong, but that's why we came to experience the wild side. The guys paired up quickly and found out that the ladies' drink prices were nearly double what I recalled. That was another red flag for me. I was chatting up one of these aggressive ladies, the one who went nude, as I was sizing up the place for ladyboys and wondering which were which and which were not. I went to the toilet and I decided I had to get my friends out of there. There were just too many red flags. I needed to tell them the joke of showing them some ladyboys was done, but when I came out of the toilet, all of my friends were gone. I didn't panic at first. I figured those high prices put them off and they had all left. I questioned the waitress as to when they left and where they went, and she told me they went to the rooms. I raced to find them and I could not find a single one. There were something like a fire escape that led to the rooms, and it was a maze. My guys were gone. I was shaking and I went back to the Carousel Bar to see who turned up. At the bar, I asked a girl if that bar still had some ladies and ladyboys. She looked puzzled, and after some back and forth, she squared up to me and said, in good English, all man. I gulped. How could those have been all men? He saw female parts, and then it hit me. Those were ladyboys, and they wanted us to see their parts as the come on. Oh boy, I did find my friends, and two had left on their own, put off by the prices and aggressive nature, but the third, my best drinking buddy, was not so fortunate, and he had a wonderful time with his ladyboy. I was forced with the situation of having to tell him that who he was with not originally female. The news sent him into a tailspin, and it was hard to get him out of it. He was the best drinking companion, always had money, always nice to the ladies in any country, and could sit on the most uncomfortable bar stool in Pattaya as if he were born on it. Later on the trip, we did walk past his lady, and upon a closer look, she was quite cute. Still, he was shaken pretty badly and didn't want to go back to her bar. Who can blame him? A day or so later, word got back to the ship of the antics with the trannies. One guy asked me to take him there to see for himself. I thought that was crazy, but I took him in there and he was quickly surrounded by ladyboys. I started to wander off and he shouted over, "Don't leave me here." I assured him he was in no danger. He said, "That's not it. I'm afraid you aren't. If you're not here, I will go to the room with one of them." Well, they were aggressive and persistent, but we got out okay. During the visit, we had been informed that the final day of the Pattaya port visit would require all of the crew to stay on the ship because of US Vice President Dan Quayle was in Thailand doing whatever, and the fleet volunteered our ship to host him for a day. The crew was disappointed. What bad luck. Half of us would be setting up cleaning the ship for the VIP, and the rest would be standing by in dress uniforms to assist in ceremonies. This wasn't how we wanted to spend our last day in Thailand. I had met a beer bar lady named O. She was not a ravishing beauty for sure, but she had genuine character, was definitely female, and was an excellent entertainer, respectful, courteous, cheerful, and more importantly, always available. I took her to the Alcazar Cabaret. At some point during the event, she was really bopping to a specific song that the Ladyboy entertainers were performing. She told me that it was a special Lao song, and she told me she was from Laos. I would never have known. There's great value in being with a lady that isn't beautiful. She was really low maintenance too. I did sneak into a Thai pharmacy to see what the fleet concerns were about and why it was off limits. Inside there was a struggling European man. He was smallish, maybe in his 30s, very shaky and frail looking. He spoke in a European accent and was ordering syringes and needles. Apparently, these pharmacies back then had everything a substance addict would need and could sell it over the counter. It was startling to see the exchange right in front of me. Generally, the sailors were very well behaved and worn down near the end of the time in port. When arriving back to the ship, we were notified that the Vice President's visit was cancelled and we now had one more day and night to stay in Pattaya. That night was a giant party because of so many guys had told their ladies goodbye already. Lots of reunions occurred.